Hi folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania, we're looking at Shudder's new Canadian creep 'em up, The Strings. Co-written by Krista Zajaslinsky and Ryan Glover, who also is the director, editor, cinematographer, probably made the coffee. The Strings is a sort of slow burn horror film that is really going for a creepy, spooky vibe. It follows a musician who's escaping from a sort of breakup with someone who was in her band. She's going to do this solo stuff, and she's gone to this sort of isolated, wintry cabin so that she can record an album. But once she's there, you start to get the sense that there's something not quite right. There's sort of spectral things hovering in the back photo, stuff starts moving, drum machines start playing, all that good sort of stuff. Which is all made worse by the fact that at the very start of the film we saw someone appear to murder someone and then walk out into the freezing cold sea, presumably to die. So really the film is this sort of mixture of a sort of drama about an artist trying to basically, you know, pull their life back together, recapture their creativity after this sort of nasty breakup and the pressures that come with that, and this more sort of supernatural ghost story. Which sounds right up my street really, because I love music and I love spooky things. I wished the two elements had coalesced a bit more outside of like I said, the ghost turning on the drum machine. I wish there was that little bit more of a connective tissue between the two, rather than just it being like, oh, I've got to finish the album, that's why I'll stay in the spooky house where spooky things are happening. Now, as I said, Ryan Glover does pretty much everything that you could possibly do behind the scenes on the film, and the film also has an incredibly small cast. I can't find it confirmed anywhere, but I'm wondering if this was shot in lockdown or just they just went, right, we're going to make a film, we're going to make it on the cheap, and we'll have as few people as possible. And I fully respect that. I don't mean that as any sort of criticism. You know, I love, you know, it's very much that like Sakamoto style of filmmaking of just, I'll just do everything because it'll mean my creative vision appears. The central character is Catherine, played by Tegan Johnson, who pretty much has to anchor the entire film. It's, apart from that brief bit at the start, it's pretty much entirely told from her point of view. There isn't a fat lot of the film at all where she isn't on screen. And for someone who has no other IMDb credits, she does a very, very good job of anchoring the film. And she spends a lot of the film on her own. And I think for someone who's obviously, you know, I've seen established actors struggle to make it seem particularly interesting when it is literally just them on screen. So for someone to do a pretty damn good job of that so early in their career is really impressive. And also to write songs for the film is even more impressive. I think she does a very good job of having a sort of slowly deteriorating mental state, slowly getting more scared, slowly, without it ever feeling too in your face, too over the top. The film's very subtle, and I think she does a very good job of maintaining that. Even when there is some clunky dialogue that's a little bit too on the nose, exposition-y. One of the first little scenes made me go, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, because it is so sort of on the nose. But overall, I think she does a really good job. Visually, the film is very cold and very bleak. Pretty much the entire film's colour palette is made up of sort of cold pale blues and whites. There are a couple of points where you get sort of warmer orange, but they're sort of usually stuck over, like there's like a heater in the main cabin, but it sort of almost just pops because it's set against this very cold, very eerie. I just keep going to say cold, really. And I think that does a very good job. It actually does feel cold. You know, you've got these vast snowy landscapes, and the film has a very slow pace. The cinematography has a very slow pace. There are lots of very slow tilts or shots that hold for a long time. And when those work, they can look really effective and very creepy. Sometimes I was like, okay, this shot's holding for just a little bit too long. There's not enough going on. So sometimes it really nails an atmosphere. Sometimes that falls away. I did like, there's a few points where she talks to people on Skype, and that is done through the cameras, and that does create a little bit of visual diversity. And there's a few points, because like I said, she's this musician, she's photographed, and you get the photographs on screen. And again, it's a nice little sort of visual change, and I thought it's one of those things that could easily have been a bit jarring. I didn't find it to be. I thought it worked really well and tied in nicely with the theme. I will say visually, there was a weird thing going on when I watched this. Like I said, it's on Shudder, and I streamed it on Shudder. And when it started, I was like, oh, it was incredibly low res, and I just thought, oh, this must be my internet. It'll clear up in a minute. And then it didn't. I checked, and I thought, is this really, really cheap and shot on a cheaper camera, and that's what it is? No, it's shot on normal. And I thought, I'm going to just... I stopped the film after sort of 10 minutes because it hadn't got any better, and I put The Hallow on Shudder, which is a very good film. Check it out. Just because I knew it had similar bits towards the start, and that was absolutely fine. That didn't have any sort of pixelated, blocky, horrible sort of fluxing colour, anything like that. And then I went back, put the strings back on, and that was exactly how it was before. So I don't know whether there's something gone wrong with the upload. This is entirely present, time of recording argument. It's only been up a couple of days, so it might well have been fixed by the time you're seeing it. Just wanted to put it out there because it got to the point where it's quite distracting, and especially those slow pans when anything that was like a straight edge suddenly started like bending and wobbling because the pixelatedness wasn't catching up, and it was just really distracting, and I don't really know what was going on. As you would expect from a film with a musician as its central character, the music in the film is actually pretty good. The score is this sort of, again, very moody, very eerie sort of collection of some strings, some synthesizer, and a lot of voice, a lot of sort of that was awful. But that sort of thing, and I'm a big fan of sort of using voice for soundtrack at the moment. It's one of my favourite things at the moment. So that worked really well, and I think the way that the soundtrack is sort of subtle and builds works really well with the longer takes. It sort of perfectly marries up. It coalesces really nicely, and I think it adds a massive amount of atmosphere because there's not a huge amount of set design going on or anything like that. So I think the score really, really helps bring in a lot of tone. And also, Johnston's songs that she writes, they're not my cup of tea, but I wasn't like, oh no, this is awful. I was going with it, and I really like that. Actually, there's one really long take in which you see her sort of play a couple of notes, hit a loop pedal, play some more, and slowly build up this song. And it was really cool to watch, actually. And I like that she does it all sat on the floor, because I've done nearly all of my composing that I've done for my films is me like sat either on this bed with stuff surrounding me, or on the floor, or whatever. So I was like, I'm glad I'm not the only person that does that. When the film is firing on all its best stuff, the atmosphere is really good. It reminded me a lot more, rather than like, I don't know, a ghosty film of today, it reminded me much more of like a sort of BBC ghost story, you know, like Woman in Black or Stone Tape or something like that, where everything's a lot more subtle, and you are getting, you know, it's the sort of film where a big set piece is like that a chair moves, rather than, you know, every cupboard flies open and pots and pans start flying all around the room and there's a big sort of ghost tornado or anything like that. I really admired them going for it with this much more subtle, spooky, we're going to hold on shots for a long time. There's a bit where you're like looking through a door and Gavin's got a torch, and it goes on for quite a while, and that was really creepy because you know something's going to happen. I just wished it had ramped up ever so slightly more, because it was getting to a point towards the end where I was like, okay, you need to give me more. And I think this is my thing with the overall film. We're going into the sort of conclusion here. It's a film that's so close, but doesn't reach where I think it needs to be at to be a recommend. I've tried to be as positive as I can, because I can see how much people tried, and that I like a lot of the ideas and I like what it was going for, but I just, something didn't click for me. I started to get a bit distracted by the end, and I think, because if it was bolshy and big and going for it all the way, you know, if it was that sort of film, I think you'd forgive its shortcomings a lot more. But I think because it's so subtle and so, you know, it has a slow pace, and I think if it had, it's one of those things that because they've gone for that and not quite reached it, it feels worse because it is slow and it bordered on a little tedious towards the end, and it's a shame, because like I said, I think it's the fact that they've tried to do something that is more difficult, that it's meant that it's not quite come together, and I really hope that it does well enough that everyone involved can have like another stab at it, because I think if they can learn from the mistakes that were made on this, just tighten up the scripting a little bit more, perhaps just iron out the sort of pacing issues a little bit more. It's so close, but it's because of the type of film it is, so close still feels so far. So yeah, I really want to see what this team can put together next time, and hopefully the fact that it's on Shudder sort of will give them that bit of push to make something just that little bit, not even bigger, but just more focused. I mean, there are far worse films to watch. I think I'd have been less annoyed if it had just been rubbish. I think it's the fact that it's so close to being good that it's almost annoyed me a little bit more. But that's just my opinion. Have you seen The Strings? What did you think of it? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.